Reporters in New York. This is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. The other night during his State of the Union speech, the president called out Congress for bad behavior and for our poisoned political era. He included his own mistakes and promised to talk to the other side. Well, today he went to the other side, a meeting of Republicans, televised live, where he took their questions and defended his own position, and no one who was watching had ever seen anything like it before. It was unusual enough to begin our broadcast tonight. White House correspondent Savannah Guthrie with us from the North Lawn. Savannah, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. This was not the first time a president has gone to the opposition party's meeting. In fact, George W. Bush did it. President Obama did it last year. But it was the first time the whole Q&A was aired live, and it made for some fascinating moments. Into the heart of the opposition, the president traveled today to Baltimore for the House Republicans' annual meeting, anxious to show the country he's serious about bipartisanship.
I don't believe that the American people want us to focus on our job security. They want us to focus on their job security.
Taking questions from Republican members of Congress for more than an hour.
I am not an ideologue. I'm not.
The meeting turned into something of a made-for-TV venting for both sides on health care.
If you were to listen to the debate, and frankly how some of you went after this bill, you'd think that this thing was some Bolshevik plot. No, I mean, that's how you guys presented it.
But Republicans told the president they'd presented ideas throughout the year, even handing him a booklet of all their proposals they said were ignored by Democrats.
They've really been stiff-armed by Speaker Pelosi. Now, I know you're not in charge of that chamber, but there really is this dynamic of, frankly, being shut out.
Acknowledging fault on both sides, the president said Democrats haven't rejected every Republican suggestion.
I've read your legislation. I mean, I take a look at this stuff and the good ideas we take.
But when Republican Mike Pence of Indiana suggested the $787 billion stimulus bill failed to keep unemployment in single digits as promised, the president pounced.
We had lost, it turns out, 700,000 jobs in January, the month I was sworn in. I'm assuming it wasn't my administration policies that accounted for that.
Republicans confronted the president for breaking promises about transparency.
When you stood up before the American people multiple times and said you would broadcast the health care debates on C-SPAN, you didn't. I was disappointed, and I think a lot of Americans were disappointed.
Overwhelmingly, the majority of it actually was on C-SPAN because it was taking place in congressional hearings in which you guys were participating. But I think it's a legitimate criticism. So on that one, I take responsibility.
Mostly cordial on the surface, the president did spar at one point with Republican Jeb Hensarling over the ballooning budget deficit.
At some point, I know you're going to let me answer.
That's the question. You were soon to submit.
With all due respect, I've just got to take this last question as an example of how it's very hard to have the kind of bipartisan work that we're going to do.
But in the end, both sides claim to have a bipartisan good time.
We'll have one more after that, if your time permits, Mr. President.
You know, I'm having fun.
Okay.
This is great.
So are we.
Well, this is an interesting moment in Washington. Polls repeatedly show America is fed up with Washington's ways, so both sides are trying to show it's the other guy's fault for all this partisan gridlock, Brian.
Savannah Guthrie starting us off. They're going to take